Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Unscripted and Unchoreographed. I'm your host, Sarah, the dancer.
And Neve, the actor.
Hi, Laurie. It's so good to have you on tonight. How did you get started in the arts?
I danced as a child. I was a competitive disco dancer at the time. There was no other dancing that I knew of, and I just loved it. I hated the competition, but I loved dancing. So I kept with it. And then I came up for an audition in Dublin when I was about 16. This was like 90s. And so the internet was only new. I didn't know anything about dance colleges or training or any dance training or anything like that. The auditions were actually in the College of Dance in Dublin. And when it was off Capel Street in Meeting House Lane, I was like, oh, wow, you can do this. I could study this. So yeah, I auditioned and I think they let me in by the skin of my teeth because I was not a ballet dancer and I was a competitive disco dancer and I had no technique, no nothing.
Can you remember what age you were when you started disco dancing?
I was like 10 because we moved to Tralee from Longford, and my friend said, "Oh, we're going to go to a dance class tonight." I had done ballet when I was a little kid, but I didn't like it enough. I was like 10. I went down to this class and I was like, "This is great. I love this. Brilliant." I did St. Patrick's Day parade in the cold rain, wearing a costume in a small town where everybody knew me as a gawky teenager. That's how much I loved dancing. I put myself in some really horrific, embarrassing positions in crazy costumes, but I loved it.
So you did ballet when you were younger.
The ballet music was played on a record player. I can still remember the smell of the room. And I did do a performance. I was a grasshopper, but I remember she put the hat on, had like an elastic band, and she came to put it on and she let it go and it snapped in my eyes. And everybody laughed at me, and I was just like, oh. So I already had ballet trauma from doing a very tiny bit of baby ballet. Good feet, bad feet probably was all we did. Yeah. And then not until I started at 17 in College of Dance, I had no formal classical training.
How did you find the transition going from doing pretty much just disco dance to suddenly you're doing like 3, 4 different styles and you're doing it like several hours a day, 5 days a week? Like I've been there and I've done that training, and you leave at the end of the week. It doesn't matter if you ended on ballet, jazz, or contemporary, you're exhausted.
It was really, really, really hard. There was quite a few dancers, as you know, they come from lots of different backgrounds. I know a lot of them arrived and were exceptional and were probably the best in their class. I wasn't. I wasn't winning all the first place trophies. So it was really, really hard. I didn't have that issue of being the best, but I really wanted to be there. But I found, because I didn't have any training, that for the first few months or the first term, it was consistently lower your ribs, lower your ribs, lower your ribs. We had a meeting with Joanna and two out of the other teachers after the first term was done. They just said to me, "Well done. We didn't think you'd make it, but you have." It was so hard to walk in every day and every day, and everybody, she didn't stop saying your name, and it was just eventually things clicked. Eventually things started to get into the body. But I do treasure those times. I do treasure that the camaraderie with the other dancers and what we learned and the relationships made. I'm still really good friends with Mariam. She's a good friend, and she's also been an amazing mentor for me throughout my life.
Do you feel that going to the college dance maybe gave you more of an idea of what kind of style you liked or kind of where you were going to go next?
Yeah, it did really. I didn't expect that contemporary would be. I really thought, oh, I'm going to love jazz because I love that. And it's all and I really didn't like it. And maybe it could have been down to the instructor or the teacher. I found that the instructors I had for jazz were very much, you just copy and you do. Whereas I found that with Mariam Ribon, she actually would explain to you she would go, you need to put the weight on this side, or you shift, or your ribs are tilted, you were taught. So I think that makes a very big difference to how you adapt, or you can learn by watching, which is often what dance is. It's just, you got to do it. you got to be perfect, you got to do it right, or you can be actually taught by somebody who actually understands the movement that they're teaching you and they know how to explain it. And that makes a huge, big difference. But contemporary was the one I was like, oh. But then I had no idea, like, really about the UK and the schools. Like, we'd sit around in the breaks and they'd be all talking about, you know, this person went to this and they went to that school and they auditioned for this. And the audition, like, this was this whole world I had no idea. I had no idea about. And because I lived down in the countryside, at least in Dublin, like, there was loads of stage schools, or there was loads of people that had gone through. But coming from competitive disco dancing, and my disco dancing teacher she didn't care. That was her focus, was like, I just want to win the next competition. So I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I was kind of at a loss when I graduated. I was a bit like, oh, I don't know. They've only just got my head around here. What am I going to do next?
Were you gearing towards any auditions in your final year of College of Dance?
I actually wasn't. It was definitely down to like a confidence issue. Probably didn't have very much self-belief in myself either, too, even though I loved it. I ended up going to London. I hadn't auditioned for anywhere, but I was only there for a few months. And I took classes and I just kind of was a bit aimless. And then I came back to Dublin. And by the end of that year, I had gotten a place to do a degree in dance in the University of Newcastle. And that was then when I continued on my training. And that was great because I hated London. Sorry, London. I hated it. I found it very hard. When I got to Newcastle, I was like, oh, they're so friendly. I love these people.
What kind of program was it?
It was choreography, and it was very much delved into the whole history of modern dance and contemporary dance. It wasn't as physically demanding as the College of Dance. It was a little bit more of a challenge with regards to, you know, you had to write essays, you had to research stuff. We then also had to have our own work that we had to choreograph and put on at the end of the year. And it was an interesting course to do. But I feel you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, I can keep following form and learn about historical studies of contemporary dance. But then, you know, you've actually got to, you know, actually do what you're you know, why are we here? We're here to dance. You gotta actually get out onto that floor and do what you were supposed to do. So I'm glad I do it. It's been very important. It's gotten me lots of work, and I almost had a job back in Dublin for working for On Board Planola because I had a degree. They didn't care it was in dance. They were like, yeah, I was like going, which I didn't take so I could continue dancing. But with regards to having a good educational piece of paper behind you, it's been really great. It's been very good. You know, it's assisted with regards to going into teaching or working with different groups.
And what drew you to choreography?
I was never given much opportunity except like in college to choreograph. At that stage, I kind of felt at a loss, and I felt like I had to kind of do what other people were doing, and I didn't really know my own voice, and I very second guessed everything. It was even down to picking a piece of music to work with would even have been a challenge. And I much preferred to work with somebody who would take the lead or would be choreographing as opposed to choreographing myself. And I would say it's only in the past few years that I am confident in being a choreographer, trusting what I create or listening to what comes out. But that's taken a long time. That definitely wasn't something that I felt was natural to me.
When you decided to take dance and go further with it, like applying for the College of Dance, did you have any pushback from family or friends that maybe this was something new to them or that they weren't fully on board with it?
No, they were on board. I have an older sister who's an artist. There's 9 years between us. When we moved to Tralee, she was starting in the National College of Art and Design. She was like, "It's great, Laurie." She goes, "You know, I'm drawing and we're painting, and I don't have to do maths. I don't have to do Irish. I do like the history of art." And I was like, "This is amazing." And you know, I was quite good. I was quite a good artist. So I was like, "That's it. I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to go to NCAD. I'm going to do this." So that was my plan. Like I was preparing a portfolio while I was doing all my disco dance competitions. But when I realized I could, I was just like, I don't want to do that. I want to dance. I want to dance. So, yeah, I got a little melodramatic with my mother at the time. I was actually talking about it with my cousin, that I kind of stormed out of the house. We lived in the countryside. And I was like, I don't want to go to art college. I want to dance. And I stormed out because she was pushing me to do work on my portfolio. And I walked down the laneway and I found a little bridge. And I sat under the bridge like a little angry troll and cried and was angry for about an hour. And then I went home. Like, she was fine. Like, she was absolutely supportive. I was just having a hissy fit. But no, they were supportive. School didn't know what to make of it. But, you know, that like nobody had studied dance from the school. I went off. So I did the audition, and then I got the letter saying I got in. I already had it going into my leaving cert. So I was like, I got my place, doing my leaving. So I was like just dead happy and a little bit smug, probably quite annoying to everybody else at the time.
I was in a similar situation as well. I got my letter like months before. I think I got my letter a few days after we had just done like our orals or something like that. And I do know as well, it can be a lot to do with a lot of practical subjects. Like if you want to like that go into art, you have to have a portfolio, and that takes a lot of time. So that leads on to my next question. You had a sister who was doing art.
Yes.
And so obviously there's some kind of arts in the family. Is it just you and your sister, or are there other people who are also artists?
Studied drama in Trinity. He was in his final year of Trinity whenever I was doing my leaving. I have two others. One brother he's languages and all of that stuff. And the other brother, he makes money. He works for Microsoft or tech. You know, my sister she's an artist. That's her work. There was no pushback, and I'm lucky that way. There's always been support, which is great. Yeah.
So we'll go back. You did your course in Newcastle and you graduated. Did you have a plan as to what you wanted to do next, or an idea of where you were going to go? Anything like that?
No, I had no plan. I came back to Dublin because family there worked there, but I knew the dance scene and I wanted to stay close to them. I didn't want to go to London. I'd had that experience. So I came back. Between London and between going to Newcastle, I went to the Shawbrook summer schools, Annika and Philip. They probably have had the biggest influence on me with regards to my dance trajectory, I'd say, because I have met and made relationships with so many dancers through it, but most especially Rachel Wynne. We created Expand Dance together. It was in Shawbrook that we met, and we were working with Marguerite Donlan, who was back over from Germany. And we became very good friends. And then we kind of navigated our post university dance world together. So I suppose I didn't have a plan. Things kind of organically happened. Doesn't mean that that's the best way. It's just the way it was. But Rachel got a Arts Council award and she went to New York. She took classes and she had studio time because Rachel is like a natural born choreographer. Like she's like takes the lead and she's fantastic. But she started to come up with her own way of creating movement and improvisational work. And she came back to Dublin. We started working together on developing that, and that's continued and that's still continuing.
And can you just explain what Expand Dance are and what you do?
Rachel was doing a lot of work with cellular healing, somatic work. The whole ethos of those Expand Dance, it's kind of part meditation, part visualization, part dance improvisation. It's about being able to unlock your own natural movement and your own voice. It also would involve voice and vocalization, and also we would have aspects of like painting or drawing or writing when we're doing the process. Anybody can do it. You don't have to be a professional dancer. Rachel's based in California now and she does the work, but she also does it online and she works with, you know, cancer patients and their families. So some people, depending on what's going on with their bodies, they might even just do the Expand Dance class or technique from their bed or sitting down or wherever they can do it from. So it's about really getting to know and trusting in your body and what it can do.
So expand dance, it's very much like about healing and getting bodies moving in maybe a slightly different way. Can you walk us through what that movement looks like? What would a session look like?
So usually kind of the setup of the class is kind of a start with visualization, meditation. So people can close their eyes, keep their eyes open, generally working with the idea of like a ball of light. As we move through the class, there's a coming back to that and listening to that and trying to get out of that the censoring voice that would stop you to do things, and just trying to listen to what the initial impulse was and to come back to that. From there, so from the visualization with the ball of light, just body scanning basically, then it would begin to do some like just kind of like a gentle warm up and movement for whatever is available to people. So we'll give options. There's a few different prompts with regards to how we would begin the movement. So like sometimes it's like move from an area in your body where you hold anger, or move from a place of joy. So sometimes things are within, sometimes things are without, sometimes things are in a memory that we would move from. So there would be an invitation or a direction given that you could come back to. The whole way throughout, we're always asking you to pay attention to what happens, or the voices that are coming in your head, or in your body, or what comes out. Trust to let it come out, whatever that may be. We will write or we'll draw. We will document it in some way. And then often there is kind of a check-in, and we will see what happened or how it was and discuss it. Some people don't want to, and that's fine. It's and then there is like a closing, kind of drawing everything together and settling the system down, slowing down. But the prompt part, you could maybe work with the one prompt in the class, or you could do 2 or 3 where you're moving from.
I have heard of emotions can be held in kind of parts of the body, or feeling different emotions. Maybe you hold tension in your shoulders. Do you kind of work with things like that as part of the class or practice?
Yeah, there's definitely an element to like, I'm reticent to say somatic because somatic is very particular, but it is somatic. Definitely there's emotions or tensions or pains that are held in the body that aren't necessarily something that is caused by a physical, like a fall or an injury. Absolutely, there is places where things are held or in pain because of a emotion or a trauma that may have happened. You just have to be aware, create a space where that's okay for it to happen, to let it pass through and not to dwell on it too much.
How long would these sessions be? Are they kind of your average kind of class time, like an hour, hour and a half?
What's a usual class time so Rachel would run them online. They would run for like an hour. I use my expandance technique whenever I'm working in the studio, and what I'm doing, it definitely informs how I teach in the studio. I'm teaching Pilates, or when I'm working with groups and choreographing with them. I definitely draw from it, but I wouldn't necessarily be saying that this is why I'm doing it or why I would choose to make decisions in class because of it. Rachel teaches a lot of them online, and she has recorded sessions that people can access online too. So you can go in and take class. But she's just started back to doing them in person in California, post-lockdown, all of that good stuff.
Could you maybe give like some examples or techniques that you've learned from doing expanding dance and that you've taken into when you're working with other people or you're choreographing?
Since I moved up to Derry, because I'm living in Derry now, I've been invited to be an associate artist of Echo Dance Theatre here, and they're amazing. Throughout the years, I've taken workshops with them, and they work in an improvisational way. Definitely with Steve Batts, it's like the poetics of dance. There's less of coming from like a somatic internal, but more of an expression of dance and of art. The access to that ability to listen and to allow the impulse to come through your performance, your art, or your what you want to express without, or making the decisions within the moment. It's not just that you kind of just let everything go out. You are aware and you're in the moment, paying attention to what you have just done, what you're doing, the decision of what you're going to do next, and also in relationship to the other people around you. The expand dance technique throughout those years really allows me to be able to be open to work with that intention, as opposed to it being an inward focus to release per se, but as an ability to allow the dance to just be the dance and the communication of your spirit and of your soul. In that way, the Expand Dance has really assisted me with working with them or dancing with them as a company. I work with 2 different companies here in Derry, Stage Beyond and also Lilliput. Really well established. I think they've been going for about 20 years. Amazing performers. Some are disabled and some have intellectual disabilities. For them as a company, the majority of them have an innate ability to do what I've spent years trying to get back to, with regards to being just letting that out and letting that be. So really, when I go into work with them, and I've had a few times with regards to dancing, try to utilize the techniques that I have to lead them to dance their dance, to move the way they need to, or they feels intrinsically right. And it's not to get in the way. So I suppose the Expand Dance technique really allows you not to get in the way of the truth or the essence of that.
So you're an artist in residence with Echo Dance. How is that going for you at the moment?
I'm actually an associate artist.
Sorry, an associate artist. Sorry.
Which kind of is like being in residence. It's so lovely. It's so amazing to live in this city. That this city has a company like Echo, and there's no company really like it in the whole of Ireland. Amazingly supportive, really beautiful ethos as a company, especially with regards to the longevity of them as a group, how they have been together and dancing together for so long. Steve's and Ursula, who passed away a few years ago, set it up together. Ideas was this constant composition, poetic composition, that there is a way that they understand each other and can dance with each other that comes from being in a company for such a long time, which I don't think is really valued, because usually the contemporary dance model is, well, maybe a little bit more in fully funded companies, the auditions. There's like a treadmill and that's the way they work and that. But I think there is a lot to be said for the longevity and the relationship and the experience of company members that have been creating together for such a long time. I get to avail of studio time. I get to avail of artistic mentorship. And there's many other associate artists that are like visual artists and theatre makers. It is an amazing space. It's an accessible space. It's right on the walls in this beautiful historic city. I pinched myself whenever I got the email. I was like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I totally want to be an associate artist. And come March, I'm going to be part of a festival. I'm going to be dancing a solo, and I haven't performed a solo in like forever. So that's kind of exciting and a little bit stressful in a good way. It's going to be in Echo's space. So they have March 8th and 9th is the festival. They're going to be putting out the information, but there's going to be workshops along with performances. You got to come up and actually see their beautiful space. They've got 2 different studios. One of the studios can be converted into the theatre space. The different festivals they've put on. One of them is called Tradition and Beyond, and that has a lot of Irish dancers from UL. Interesting stuff from traditional Irish dancers, kind of exploring their craft. The stuff that has been shown up here has been amazing. I had to move up here because it was one of those, we're selling the house. I'm a single mom, and I was like, I can't afford anywhere in Dublin. Even if I could try and get somewhere in Dublin, we were nowhere near their schools. So I was like, where am I going to move? And I have a family connection up here. We've always been up and down here. So I was like, I'm going to move to Derry. I was like, right, I'm just going to do this. And I opened a studio here, Pilates studio, with a business partner. She's from Derry. And I was asking her, what are the Pilates studios like in Derry? She was like, well, there's not really. I've always thought about opening one at home. And I was like, isn't it? And we were in lockdown. I got a text message from her 2 days later. She's like, I'm at home, drinking wine, dancing in my room. She's like, let's do it. So I moved up here. I'm trying to run a business and get a business established and keep dancing and creating. So there's a lot to do, but it's a great city and it's full of amazing people. There's just a bit of space to breathe here.
I know we did ask this question to another person, and if you don't want to talk about it, absolutely no problem. I know for a lot of people, they freelance, and it's hard to freelance when you have a child or you're pregnant. It's some people, they have to just give up entirely for a period of time, and others, I don't know how they do it. They seem to be up and running around 2 weeks after giving birth, and I'm like, that's incredible. Fair play. If you'd like to talk about your experience.
I think it's important to talk about, especially as women, as creators. I think when I had my son, it actually empowered me and made me believe a little bit more in myself. It gave me confidence back. And in some ways, having my children gave me the strength to feel like I'm stronger than I thought I was. I was in the studio with babies and buggies and working with different companies. It was hard, but I navigated as best I could to try and keep my toe in the work. Did bits here and there and auditions and got bits, but it was hard. But when I separated from my husband, I had to just stop altogether because it was a really hard time, and I had to focus on making money. So I was already a Pilates instructor, but I kind of really lent into it and started working for a studio and got even more qualified. I'm like a fully trained apparatus Pilates instructor, and I still keep doing training. And I trained in FAMO, which is fascial movement work, which is amazing, which has really affected how I dance and what I'm teaching and what I'm creating now. It was just before lockdown. The therapist said to me, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I want everybody to be happy." And they were like, "No, but what do you want?" And I was like, "I don't know." It took me a good year. And then lockdown happened, and I was like, I want to dance. That's what I want to do. I need to be dancing. And actually, lockdown was really good for me because I didn't have to run around, do all the school runs. I wasn't running to Pilates studio. I could teach online. In my kitchen was the only space in our tiny house. I was able to take classes. I was able to get involved with stuff. I made applications. Lockdown for me was horrible for many different reasons, but it actually opened many doors for me. And I wouldn't have been able to get in those doors or do the things because they wouldn't have been available, because you would have had to travel. There was a lot about accessibility for those who couldn't get access, which was freaking amazing for me. And I think for my kids, it was good for them to see that I would get into my kitchen and I'd move things, and they'd be coming in and out making a sandwich, and I'd be taking a dance class, or I'd be creating something, or I'd stay up till 3 a.m. writing an arts council application. But it is a challenge that I don't think it's acknowledged with regards to the arts as much as it should be. And though things are changing and it's really good, but it's not. I'm not necessarily talking about Ireland. I'm just talking the world over. It's the men that are heads of companies, the men that are picked to be choreographers. That funding disparity, and that's, I suppose, over every sector. I remember in lockdown, just before lockdown, reading a book about this guy who was one of those adventure guys. He'd written a book about silence. I didn't finish reading it. And he went to the North Pole or the South Pole or something. He wrote this book about you never experience anything. But the start of it, he was he left his wife with the 3 kids. I was just raging. And then, I just get a bit there's a whole idea that you need months and months and months. And it'd be great to have months and months of time and free space to focus on my art, to focus on my craft. I do it on the quiet times. I could still make it. It's still important. I have a voice. I have an experience, which, I want to express. I think it's just as important and as vital as, say, someone who gets to have months and months and months working with whatever group of people in a space where they come in from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. And yeah, that has a space, but I think there's so much scope for what is also created in the other parts, in the other ways. I'm glad you asked that question.
No, but I think it's such an important thing because there are so many women in the arts. And it is a big question. When do you have kids? If you want kids, some people are have them young and then you can bounce back. Or some people are have them as late as possible. And then some people are oh, just have them whenever. That's in terms of just trying to plan maybe a time that you're when would best suit having a child. Of course, nature doesn't always be so kind and plan like that. But that thing of once you have a child, you have a job particularly for dancers and actors as well, it's so physically demanding, not just on your body, but even on your mind, especially when you're the person who has to create the movement, create the story. That's another almost job in itself. You're not just going into a studio and, oh, okay, they want me to put my right foot out and go left hand, and yeah, great, perfect. We'll just do that 3 times a day. That's that routine. Grant, come in, do the same thing next week. In about 6 weeks, we'll have it all done. It'll be great. When you have to create that yourself, there's months of work that happen beforehand, and you have to have some kind of space, peace, quiet. We were talking to Michelle Call about it as well. When she was creating her work, she would stay away from her family home. And she was in a place where the funding she received was able to cover that. Have you been able to take maybe childcare costs into consideration when applying? Or
Has been recently, there was 1 or 2 that did have that. Caring responsibilities, let us know with regards to, so we can support you. I'm trying to think, I think that was only the Gap Day ones that I had seen. A vital voice is lost when people can't access a perspective and experience. I've only seen that once or twice. It's not really.
It's not common.
It's not
kind of practice just to have it on forms.
Yeah, and I'm like lucky with regards. I had family nearby that could kind of assist me whenever I would be working on projects or I'd gotten a gig or something that happened. And now that my youngest is 14, kind of just dealing with teenageness at the moment, all the fun that comes with that. But I don't have the bigger responsibilities when they were smaller, which was hard. There was a point I just had to kind of step away. So when I came back, I kind of wasn't expecting, because there never was any kind of acknowledgement with regards to supporting women, mothers, parents in the arts. I remember when I had my second child, working with Rena Neil, and she had her company Katog, and she was really interested in making a piece that could accommodate having performers who had children. And she was really great at the time, I think she's just brilliant with forward focus thinking, and I think she had her first son then at that point. He was small too. So that was great to be involved with that. It's challenging with children. And that's like with Echo. I sat down and talked with Steve about becoming an associate artist. His sustainability factor with regards to company and company members and the longevity and the sustainability of being able to drop your kids to school, come in and work, go back and collect them. If they're sick, time needs to be taken off. If you've got elderly parents, these are all the things they take into account with regards to their company and their company members, because you're not just a machine as a dancer. I think there's a lot of the training is you're just a body and you just got to do the forms and you just be quiet and you shut up and you do the thing. You're not to be anything other. But that is like a really horrible way to look at your dancers, at your performers, at your, they're human beings and they come with all of those things.
From my own experience, when it gets to the point where you get very little notice sometimes for some jobs and you're on a plane and you have a week to figure out, okay, I need to stay somewhere. How does the public transport work in this place? How do I get from A to B? And that can lead to dancers getting just burnt out and tired and having to leave. I kind of forget what point I was trying to make there.
It's not just you arrive in and you start working, there needs to be like a level of care and level of care duty to these artists who are arriving to work with you or to create with you, because they arrive in with that. Trainer in my Pilates, and she was amazing, but she used to say, like, if her clients were late, she'd be like your session has already begun in your body. If they're late or if whatever they've carries through, it has an effect on. It's a funny art in that the misconceptions or the preconceptions with regards to dancers and dance as an art form and its relevance and its importance, and the hierarchy of is also something to contend with, and that's a real challenge.
I remember being in drama school and they'd say, leave everything at the door. You can and you can't, and I've noticed with some people get very stuck in their identity as an artist. I'm an artist and that is all I am. I am nothing else but an artiste. And that's great if you want to be that way, but not everyone's like that.
Yeah.
And I think as well, COVID was a perfect example. When something like that is taken away from you, that can be very hard for those people. And I think it probably all went through a bit of a crisis of what do I do now in lockdown?
So this is to bring it like around that through dance and the people I've met, like more than my formal training, it's been the people I've met in my formal training and the bits in between. I was part of the Dublin Youth Dance Company also. And actually, Rachel, Expand Dance Rachel Wynn, she actually choreographed, I think, for 2 years and ran the Youth Dance Company before then Marianne took over it.
Oh, right.
And when Rachel went to New York, Marianne was like running it and she was like, you should come in and do it. And I was like, okay. And I came in and I met Jodie O'Neill. Jodie is my very, very good friend and co-conspirator. So we met dancing together and then we waitressed together for years. I've been lucky enough to choreograph with her, and she lived with me when she came back from Berlin. I went into labor in my house. Like we've lived through lots, and back after COVID, we managed to connect back together, and we're working and creating together at the moment. She is so amazing. Talk about somebody who is very open about accessibility. We have lots of discussions and chats with regards to this and motherhood and being an artist and creating. You know, a lot of the times what I found and what really stuck me and like made me feel really small was the uber intellectualization and the huge egos of certain people or certain ways of thinking that you should be doing things and the right way, or this is the only way to be and an artist and this is the only way to communicate and create, and kind of getting the shackles of that off and being with people and working with people who have the same frame of mind and who are making a difference and creating different work and work that has impact and work that is open to people on many different levels. It doesn't all have to come at them for the same reason or they experience it the same way. There's so much like to learn and to see from a huge variety of groups of artists, but yeah, to get stuck into the identity of I am this and I am that it's a tough one for the people that are stuck in it. And I've seen firsthand how especially lockdown was like devastating for certain artists. Their whole identity was gone with regards to what they were doing. They didn't know what to do, and it's terrible, and they're only getting back to who they are now.
I think Laurie kind of answered it. What kind of advice you'd maybe give to like a younger artist, kind of maybe similar to yourself, looking to get into dance, or even like a younger self? But yeah, you're kind of hitting very good points there.
I don't know if I'd have the right where to go about it and the best way to go. I've had lots of discussions with other dancers and other performers and actors about the formal training. You know, it's a hard one. A lot of people never recover from going to formal training. And I suppose when I decided I needed to get back to dancing, I needed to get back to pre-formal training. Who was that? Who was that person? But I do love having the techniques I have, though I don't want to cling to them. It's good. It's good I have them. There's a good basis, but that they are the gospel and the only gospel is bullshit. You know what I mean?
I think that is excellent advice. I think I really needed to hear that right now.
So we have our final question, and it's whatever your thoughts are. Is there anything you feel the government could do to help artists in any way? That can be through funding, through a rehearsal space, through health, through mental health, anything at all that you feel, or maybe you're like, no, I think that everything's good.
Personally, the number one issue is housing and having a home. That goes along with to expand the basic income for the arts is essential. I'm not on it, but I some friends who are on it, and literally it's been like a lifesaver. The reason I here, the reason I had to uproot my whole life and family, and I know I'm not, there's so many people in Ireland who are in precarious positions. I now live in a different jurisdiction. Cross-border funding, the funding that is here in Northern Ireland is pittance. There is also a huge divide with regards to funding that stays to the east of Northern Ireland and to the west. So at this end, there is definite issues, and this goes through business funding, educational funding in Northern Ireland. It stays all around Belfast. And that's major issues for here. I think important to link up the arts cross-borderly. I grew up all over Ireland, but my mum and dad are from Derry, and I've been crossing this border my whole life. You know, there's a big kind of like blind spot or chip on the shoulders with regards to Northern Ireland. And I think one way you can change that is by the arts and creating those communities. Housing, basic income for the arts, cross-border funding.
Actually, you're the first person to bring up housing, and it's wild because when you do explain then, because it's such a problem, and this is why one of the many reasons we started doing this podcast was that everyone was leaving Dublin and you weren't able to just meet up with people. And a huge reason why people are leaving Dublin is because the cost of housing and rent. You're the first person to mention that the housing is a big problem for artists.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad you brought it up because it is such a big issue. It's an issue for everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a teacher or you're a dancer or you're a shopkeeper. I suddenly couldn't think of any jobs there.
If you're spending all your time, like it has a mental health effect with regards to insecurity, security of tenureship, what the houses are like. You're afraid for your life to ask for any upgrades for fear of being thrown out or rents raised. Where is the ability to have space? And I said that, you know, to have space. Moving up here, I have space. I can gain an inch. Dublin, there was no inches to be gained. Like you were just, is this month the month I'm going to be? I'm already at the end of being able to afford anything. If I get that grant, okay, it'll give me like a week or two in the studio, but where does that leave me? So yeah, I get really enraged about it all.
But it makes sense because you were living in Dublin and you moved all the way up to Derry because that was what was going to suit your situation. But the fact that you had to make that decision and move your whole family with you, and that means changing schools and leaving friends behind, having to make new friends. You must have gone through so much, and I have no doubt that all those kind of decisions made, especially when you've got kids involved, like it's not easy and it's going to be incredibly stressful.
It was stressful, but I'd say this, you know, to a lot of my female friends. It's like I had to go. I couldn't stay. Well, how do you know it's going to work? I said, I didn't know it was going to work. I just had to make it work. I couldn't wallow. I couldn't cry. I couldn't have a mental breakdown because I had to take care of 3 kids. This is a big generalization, but it's true. Women, they just get on with it. We just got to get it done. That's it. It's shite. But that's also the burden of the government cutbacks. Disproportionately affects women. The housing issue disproportionately affects women because we don't earn as much and we leave the workforce to take care and raise children or take care of dependents, elderly people. We hit the burden. It's our money. It's our pension. We're the ones that are in poverty.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. And I had starred your email, and then I was like, okay, oh shit, yeah, I gotta get back.
You're grand. Don't worry about it.